Hi, this is Jeff with the INTJ equation, and today I'm joined by Bob, the ENTJ. He was on my Discord server, and I thought he's a pretty interesting guy. Definitely deep into astrology and pre-historical civilizations and whole wide variety of things. Would you like to tell the people a bit about yourself, Bob?
Sure. I'm Bob the ENTJ. And on Discord, I'm known as Xeon. I used to have a Discord server for personality MBTI mostly, but all the other systems too. It was called NT Galactic Empire. That was at least a couple of years ago that we made that. We had a lot of different people coming through there, and there's a lot of typology discussion going on all the time. Um, so I know quite a bit about it, and I have been doing all kinds of different things my entire life. It's quite the journey.
Very cool. Okay. So you're definitely different from most ENTJs I met. Was it you that said that you were in a relationship with an ENTJ, or am I thinking of somebody else?
Yes, correct. That's me.
So how does that work?
Well, she was a very staunch feminist at the start, but also very sort of truth oriented. Like, no matter how angry something made her, if it was truthful, eventually she'd kind of get over herself. And so it's not necessarily anything inherently against feminism, but eventually she got to a point where she didn't want to be in control all the time. And, up until that point, she was very afraid of certain aspects of relationships. And so the feminism got shoved aside and she started to become sort of more traditionally feminine. And then it was actually pretty easy from there on out. We kind of were on the same wavelength all the time. And I don't even notice, half the time that we're kind of the same personality.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, definitely control is something that we talked a lot about on Discord server with the ENTJs. They really
Oh yeah. Control is
control.
terrible with the Intjs. And I can tell you from personal experience that it has to be overcome. It's usually like a vulnerability issue. It's usually fear. Um, they usually don't want to let go of control because it's so incredibly threatening to let people in because they're so sensitive deep down and all that stuff to inputs from other people. So
What are some tactics you use to control the control issues?
control the control issues. Uh, Rigorous, consistent psychological honesty, which, goes way above and beyond what most people would ever think. So we're constantly part of the conscious intention of our self-improvement, both of us, and we do this with each other all the time too, is that we're always trying to be more honest about what we want, about what we're feeling. And it doesn't matter if it's something that quote unquote looks bad or sounds bad. We have to be completely honest about things. Sometimes it takes time, right? But we get there eventually. And as we discuss and dissect everything, we also start to make connections and realizations about sort of our deeper emotional drives and mindset and everything. And then it's a lot easier to address it. And ENTJs are great at self-improvement and great at honesty and psychology, behavioral psychology, I guess you could say. But, it's actually a strength that they can use to sort of overcome those deficits.
Very cool. I think I told you a little about this one ENTJ that I kind of grew up with off and on through school. We weren't really close during school, but I don't know. She really, really liked me, but I couldn't do it just because how controlling she was. Because INTJs really value their freedom,
Oh, yeah.
and and she just really wanted to be controlling. So just it just
Yep.
never worked.
Yep. That's something I've had to learn too in dealing with INTJs. And if I keep talking to you, I'll be exercising the same things I've already learned. With INTJs, you really just need to let them go and do their thing, give them their space, just let everything be. And usually they'll come back and talk to you. But being in front of an INTJ is kind of like, okay, it's a magical wizard and they kind of teleport in and teleport out. And you can't try to control it. So,
Yeah, we get very defensive if you try to take away our free will. That's for sure.
oh, yeah, yeah. It's one of the biggest things for INTJ as far as I've ever observed.
But ENTJs, they're pretty independent as well, right? They don't like being controlled.
Yeah, they're independent. Well, sometimes they don't mind being controlled, but it really, really depends on who's controlling them and how competent and respect worthy that person is.
Interesting. I was actually
Yeah.
I have a long commute to work, and I was re-listening to some audiobooks that I had. One was Way of Superior Man by David Deidre, I think that's his last name.
Mhm.
And he's talking about how women have an emotional response and you can't really talk to them in a rational or logical way. Is that not true with your ENTJ girlfriend?
Rational response. Well, actually, we're always kind of sitting around and making fun of other women. I mean, lightheartedly, mostly, sort of, and how their responses are so incredibly irrational compared to hers. Now, sometimes she will start having irrational responses for various reasons. There might be a hormonal thing going on. There might be all kinds of things that happen, but most of the time, she's pretty rational and grounded. And because she opened up so much and because she let go of the need for control, once again, the great irony, the paradox, you have more control. And
Mhm.
so I think that in the case of women, the human, I guess I'm going to go off on a tangent. Is that all right?
Go for it.
All right. Well, in the case of women, the human species, at least in the Western world, humans have gone down this path where they think that because of American exceptionalism and because of the fact that our culture has kind of dominated a lot of world thought for a long time, this whole independent, I have to do everything myself mindset. I think that women have lost a sense of how to just simply be feminine and soft. And not all women are going to be very feminine and soft. Obviously, you have outliers, there's a bell curve, there's exceptions on either end of that. But in the middle, there's a huge sort of majority of the population. So women are not necessarily attuned anymore to what they actually are. Dare I say it? Someone's gonna come after me for that. But basically, because women have been put into this they've been forced into this sort of box by society where they're kind of hiding their own natural responses and inclinations. That lack of ability to be honest about what they are as creatures, as animals, has actually probably made them more emotional and less in control of it because it's something they can't deal with properly. They don't know how to deal with it anymore. And so the ENTJ that I know, Lantferia, she's on the server too, but she'll tell you, like, yeah, if you can actually be more honest about your sort of creature's self and creature needs at a deeper, more visceral level, it's a lot easier to stay calm and rational. See?
Yeah, that's exactly what the book touched on. The Way of Superior Man was pretty much like with feminism being the way it is, and really just trying to replace masculinity and feeling that it doesn't need masculinity anymore, which I think is ridiculous. I mean, I understand feminism to an extent, but totally eliminating males and manliness is false. It's not a good way to go.
Yeah, it's a terrible idea.
And they just lose touch with their own feminine side. And I mean, it's really just a balance.
And I always tell people it's like, you'll be masculine or feminine through your own personal lens, but you cannot deny that it is still there. No, I don't know about necessarily about transgender or other people that don't fit into the categories, but I do know that the ones who are basically heterosexual like that. And we need to start promoting more messaging and I guess education about that.
For sure, I'm a firm believer in androgyny, where you have both male and female traits. It's
Yeah, yeah,
perfectly
sure.
fine, but there just needs to be a balance. I mean, I'm a firm believer that women should have equal rights, but really they're looking for superiority now.
Right, right, yep. And boys are being told that well, they're not being told much of anything implicitly. They're basically being told that girls go and do everything and not them. So
Yeah, yeah, and
yeah.
we have to just suppress our masculinity. And deep down, women really want men. They don't
Oh
want
yes, they do. Yep.
they
Without a
don't want
doubt.
these weak wimps that are submissive to them. But even that's what they say they want. I mean, statistically, most women don't know what they want.
Yep.
Good 45% of women are SFJs, and they have really low NI, and NI is kind of about what you want.
Yeah.
And they're very
Yeah.
indecisive. So I think that's where the whole they're very NE based, kind of like what other people want. They want to be kind of told what to do to an extent, but society says otherwise.
Yeah. And you mean you're asking about the NTJ girl, but it's like once she kind of got over all these constructs that she got from society, she she loves being feminine, and you would think like female ENTJ least likely to ever do that, right? No, she's probably one of the most feminine people that I know. It's just that when there's a fool that transgresses her boundaries, then she comes down on them like a hammer, and all of a sudden it's like, I'm going to kill you, but but otherwise she's very, very yielding, very soft, and everything else. So, and she really enjoys it, and we've been, helping her consciously develop that for a long time now.
Maybe she kind of tapped into her ISFP dual. I mean, a lot of types are more masculine and some are more feminine, I would say.
Possibly, yeah. I mean,
Does she have like an artistic side to her at all? Any self-expression?
she used to be a violinist.
No.
She used to do a lot of violin playing. She doesn't anymore. She hasn't for quite some time, but she used to be very heavy into that. And she used to be in band in high school and stuff.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. So one thing that we were very popular on the Discord server was you're very into astrology and very good at it, I would say.
Oh, gee, thanks.
Would you like to tell like your background with that? You got it from your INTJ dad, right?
I did. Yeah. He was going through high school and college, late 60s, 70s. He got a degree in philosophy, actually. And then he went into the Navy, but he was into like all that stuff in the 70s when he was basically doing drugs. I mean, that's just what they did. And he did astrology. He was actually one of the first people who played Dungeons and Dragons, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah. Yep. And we still have all his old D&D material, but he used to do astrology and do people's charts for them. And he was always really interesting in how he interpreted things. As you know, INTJs tend to have a very sort of almost preternatural sense of things. It's like this really amazing ability to see beyond and kind of pull out these truths from things. And he was pretty good at making predictions for the future, but he was also pretty good at interpreting charts. I just didn't see him do it as much as I would have liked to while he was still alive. He's dead now, but he told my brother and I when we were younger what our charts were like giving us and everything. And I kind of stored that in the back of my mind. I thought it was interesting. I've always really liked anything that involves lots of categories and lots of learning about all the intricacies of those categories and how they interact. So basically, naturalistic intelligence. If you ever have seen the multiple intelligences test, you'll know that they've added a couple of categories onto it. They're not really sure if they're intelligences or not, but when I take it, I get naturalistic intelligence like through the roof. It's always my strongest category. So with astrology, it's like overdrive. It's like a classification system on steroids for analyzing people, which is part of why I enjoy it.
Naturalistic intelligence is kind of like an intuitive intelligence.
Yeah, kind of. And one of the things it's associated with is categorizing of things. So there's like this component that goes into being able to understand what things are like each other and what things aren't, what things should be tied together and what things shouldn't, and the giant series of infinite Venn diagrams that all overlap and everything. That's basically naturalistic intelligence. And doing it at a high level, it sounds kind of simplistic, right? But doing it at a high level can be very, very challenging. So they think that this so-called naturalistic intelligence was something that we used to use to survive and categorize plants and animals and gather things and hunt, So
it's very interesting. Even like a modern book, I don't remember the name of it now. It pretty much took Jung's cognitive functions and all the intelligence, pretty much all summed it up, except they left the intuition out. Jung even almost left out intuition because it's just such a strange phenomenon. It's just really hard to explain.
It is hard to explain. And speaking of Jung, I believe he also did astrology stuff. So
yes, he was. I just got done reading one of his books, Aeon, today. He's very brilliant and very hard to read.
Yeah, he's such an interesting person, especially given that he was such a forward thinker and with all that stuff that he came up with all at once. But
yeah, definitely. I would think he's an INTP for sure.
Seems like it. Yep. Kind of like Socrates.
I never really thought to type him. You think he's an INTP?
I think so. I mean, obviously, all that far back in history, it's kind of hard to tell. We only have indirect sources describing him, but I've heard people say that he is. It seems like he is based on what he did. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to historical figures in a lot of ways
Oh
because
yeah, yeah,
it's foreign for one thing, and it's the translator's interpretation of their writing. So
yeah.
you're kind of getting the type of the type of the interpreter, really.
Mhm. Yeah. Aristotle definitely seems like an ENTJ, though. That's pretty, it seems fairly clear cut. Possibly not, but probably, you know.
Maybe. Are you into Stoic philosophy at all?
Yeah, yeah, a little bit. I mean, it's very similar to what I learned in terms of psychological practice way back, like what, 16 years ago when I started getting into psychology more. Which, by the way, is when I started getting into the astrology stuff more. But yeah, it's very, very strongly parallel to the brand of philosophy and psychology I was learning. So,
Yeah, it's pretty much CBT therapy took a lot from Stoicism, I think.
oh yeah, yep, yep.
Yeah, I think that's a good chance that Marcus Aurelius is an INTJ.
Yeah, yeah. He was a really interesting character too.
Yeah, just
Last of the good emperors, wasn't he?
yeah, he was like one of the last good five,
Yep.
and his son took over after he died and starting going downhill more.
As detailed in the movie Gladiator.
Was it Marcus Aurelius in Gladiator?
Yeah, yep,
I didn't know that. I'm gonna rewatch that then. I rarely watch movies. I think I watched it once a long time ago,
yep.
way
His
before.
psycho son took over. Yep,
Wow, that's cool.
yep.
All right, before we jumped into the functions, you were diagnosed with Asperger's, right? That's something that INTJs are often accused of having. How did that diagnosis come about, if you don't mind talking about that?
Oh boy. Okay. Well, let me think. The summer of 2018, I was trying really hard to become a data scientist, and I've been taking a lot of courses and doing a lot of like coursework and everything, and doing all these projects to build up a portfolio. And so I I had gotten tired of doing it. So that summer I decided I was going to take a break from all of it. And I was just going to pursue other things that I actually enjoyed for a change. And I had no idea this was coming seriously. This, I mean, obviously this was only a few years ago. So I discovered it in like my early 30s. But um, what was I doing? I made the server. I made the server for MBTI. That was one of the first things I did because I just thought it'd be a fun project. You know, I was migrating people over from 16p, 16 personalities, the website. I'd met a lot of INTJs there because I made a project. It sounds kind of stupid. I made this project called Save the INTJs because my dad had had so many, you know, emotional problems in his life that I wanted to try to help them kind of develop their emotional and interpersonal side, and with varying degrees of success. But that's a whole other thing. So I was doing all this other stuff during that summer, and then I started getting into studying mall architecture and vaporwave art because for some reason it was just calling to me at the time. And I was like, I'm just going to put down all sense and reason. I'm just going to go after whatever it is that's inspiring me at the time. I just don't care anymore, right? I'm so tired of doing all this other stuff. It's not getting anywhere right now. And so I started getting more into art again, which I had done sporadically before that, but not very much. And then I started, you know, drafting characters for the game that I was planning on making for the longest time. And as I did it, I was discovering that I had all these like sort of processing and working difficulties with it. And I could not figure out what was the problem because it didn't seem like this had happened before. And so I was starting to sort of like research what was going on in terms of like my processing. I'd always thought that I had ADHD.
Hmm.
Um, the inattentive variety, the daydreaming variety, which is why nobody ever diagnosed me with it because it's invisible. And eventually on YouTube, one day I woke up and this video just hit me in the face out of nowhere. There was a video in my feed that said, you know, how do you know if you have Asperger's? I was like, oh, so I clicked on it. And then I immediately was like, okay, everything this guy is listing seems to apply to me. And it applied to my dad and his dad, as well as people on my mom's side of the family too. Um, so then I found a place here in Michigan in Grand Rapids, and I went there to get the diagnosis, and they said, "Yep, you are definitely you're definitely one of the ones." And part of what really clinched the diagnosis was the fact that I had all these early life sort of symptoms like severe digestive distress and somewhat delayed language development. But then I used like really big words. My dad said he was shocked because like I wasn't talking for the longest time. Then all of a sudden I just started saying all these things that seemed way beyond, you know, like a 2-year-old or whatever. So
It's
Yep.
interesting.
Yeah. And so then I got that diagnosed, and that was a big thing because it changed the way that everyone in my family looked at our family, you know. So,
You think there's a hereditary element to it?
oh yeah, without a doubt. No, they haven't been able to identify very easily any like single set of genes that corresponds to this, but they know it's inherited, and it usually travels down the male line. Sometimes it travels down the female line, which is what happened on my mom's side.
They actually took out the Asperger's diagnosis in the DSM-5 because a lot of people diagnosed with Asperger's wasn't getting the behavioral health help needed because they didn't really see
Yeah.
it and it's kind of lumped
Yep.
it in as autism. Do you think there's a difference between the two?
No, I don't. I just think it's an issue of severity. And I also just think it's an issue of where it has affected your nervous and brain development. Because, of course, this is something that affects your brain from a developmental standpoint, obviously, right?
Hmm.
So, I think some autistic and Asperger's, supposed so called Asperger, I could say high functioning autism, but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone who has it, everyone who's on the spectrum, I think, has slightly different developmental strengths or issues or whatever. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't like me saying it, but I do think it's basically basically a kind of a defect. It's possible that if we hadn't had civilization in a million years, it would have been considered some kind of evolutionary leap forward. But right now, it seems like it's an issue. It's a problem to a large extent. It does come with strengths, but it's a problem. And so when people's brains are developing with it, obviously there's a lot of issues with their brain development, and they'll have somewhat different issues. So, like, everyone thinks that I'm not because I get humor, and I usually do humor really well. But that's something that some autistics can do, and they still have all these other areas where they're definitely autistic. So,
That's definitely why stereotypes aren't helpful. I work with kids on the spectrum and each one is different.
yep, yep. And
Autism is just something that's just completely misunderstood still. We know very little of it.
oh yeah, it's terribly misunderstood. And did you know that no matter what your severity of autism and symptoms, the joblessness rate for autism is what, like 60 or 70% across the board for all autistics? And it doesn't matter how socially close to normal you are still too much on the other side of that fence where you can't relate to the group properly. And so their unemployment rate is sky high, even if they're high functioning.
That's a diagnosis that I often wondered for myself. I mean, I almost went and got I don't know if you got the ADS screening, the ADOS screening, whatever you want to call it, but they want to charge me $1,000 for it. And I just couldn't afford that. But I just kind of
Yeah.
wanted to come to
Yeah.
terms with it.
I had to pay for it myself. And yeah, I was actually still waiting on the insurance to process that and pay me for that. But
Yeah. Is it kind of a sad thing we have to do to get answers, I guess? Did it give you any kind of closure, you would say?
oh, yeah, it was a massively important thing. I mean, before that, there was no quote unquote excuse, for me to be different from other people, to have a different life circumstance. I mean, another bad thing was that I had chronic fatigue for like 20 years. It started in like 2000. I just started getting really sick one day and then it never stopped. And it massively impacted my nervous system, my neurochemicals. I went through lots and lots of periods of depression, all kinds of terrible things. And the doctors just kept saying it's all in your head or you're crazy. I mean, one time they treated me like I was a drug addict. They actually gave me a course of treatment like I had been on drugs just in case I was, some crazy guy that had OD'd and come off the street. But
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of faith in modern medicine. If I get in a car accident or get shot, I'm going to a hospital. But other than that, I think
yeah, yeah.
natural remedies are probably the best to look at first.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's something I thought I might have had, like I said, but I definitely was just like, that's one reason why I got into psychology, because I always wondered just why I was so different from people. But I definitely found a avoidant personality disorder, and I was actually diagnosed with that through a psychiatric evaluation. But yeah, it's
Oh, yeah.
very fitting, and it gave me that closure as well. I still struggle with it, of course, but I always wondered like why I just didn't get social interaction and
Yeah.
very
And
flat affect, but that's just an INTJ thing, really.
yeah, like you already said, it's like, well, they're kind of naturally just autistic anyway. We always joked about that in the server too. It's like INTJ is naturally autistic, ENTJ is naturally borderline,
Yeah.
No.
And the ENTJ I knew, she definitely seemed borderline for sure.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's terrible. And I kind of had a little bit of that myself, but I worked past it. So it wasn't like a serious thing. I've had some ENTJs who were very severe. So
Yeah, I think each personality type responds to trauma in a different way, and they can develop personality disorders and mental illnesses just based on type. That's something I definitely want to look into and
Oh
study,
yeah.
that we could prevent this. Like if we can.
I was thinking that quite a while ago, and I'd really be interested to see someone officially studying it because it seems like such a leap forward in understanding how people form psychological defenses and behaviors in trauma situations, you know?
Yeah, trauma's just something that's overlooked for sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I still feel like most people don't get proper psychotherapy at all, but that's, to me, that's more of a political and sort of systemic issue than it is one of psychotherapy not knowing what to do. So, and that's really unfortunate.
Yeah, she hasn't been active lately. She popped in a while, but I actually did a podcast with her. Name is Lauren. She's an INTJ in Malaysia. She's at the end stages of becoming a therapist, and there it's just like
Oh yeah, I think I saw the video you did. Yep.
really, yeah, and it's just like not taken seriously at all in that part of Asia.
Oh
Yeah,
no, yeah, they're still in the dark ages. You know, we think we're bad, but then
yeah. I think mental health is the key to fix many, many problems in the world.
I do too. I think that a lot of our political difficulties and societal issues are actually rooted in a complete ignorance towards psychology. But
Yeah, the way we treat criminals and drug addicts and
oh yeah,
criminals.
and the way that we don't treat certain people who do need it, that just kind of get glossed over, and it's like, oh well, they're just normal, or we're just going to ignore their behavior. So what? It's like, well, actually, there's real problems here.
Yeah, like if they understood that all people aren't the same, as TSTJs namely, then we kind of live in harmony and we kind of understand each other a little better.
Yep.
All right, I want to get into the functions here a little bit. I kind of like to go in order, but I get off track sometimes. So how does your TE affect you in life? Definitely sounds like you're pretty well read and educated.
Does my TE affect me? Well, I love crushing things with sledgehammers and axes, my favorites. Um, Swords are good too. And I've always really liked, so it's really weird, of course, with your, if you're an ENTJ, and maybe to some extent with INTJs too, but it's like you love activities and games that can, on the one hand, be incredibly abstract and involve just complete strategizing without any
Mhm.
direct action or inputs whatsoever. And then on the other hand, just like total visceral action games and, you know, being really strongly involved in your immediate environment and stuff like that. So in terms of
Yeah.
how it's affected my life, I mean, what, like the trajectory of my life, how I use it, or
Yeah, just in general, how you used it, how you developed it. I guess you really don't develop it, it's just kind of your bread and butter, right?
yeah, yeah, oh yeah, right from the very start, extraordinarily passionate about action of all kinds. I loved setting up action sequences and scenes with like my toys and my action figures all the time. And then I also liked going out and, you know, shooting things and crushing things. And I also really just liked getting out in my environment and seeing all of it and learning about it and exploring. So exploration was a big thing for me too. And I don't know how different I am with all this stuff because, of course, if I am a high functioning autistic, like I've been diagnosed, then um, it's like there's no filter in place, at the very least, no social filter, if not a lot of other filters. And so compared to other ENTJs, I'm fairly different. I've been surprised how different I am consistently from other ENTJs I've met.
Yeah, I that's when I talked to you, like, wow, is he really an ENTJ? I mean, it
Yeah, what
definitely
do I
like,
seem like to you exactly?
I mean, you do seem like an ENTJ from a cognitive standpoint. It just you're like super abstract.
Oh yeah, yeah, extremely. It's like to me, there's no boundary between the physical world and the abstract world. And so I'm always kind of intensively engaged in both at the same time. It's actually pretty strange.
You're like a really talkative INTJ almost, you know?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Speaking of that, it sounds like your NE is definitely in place. Do you think your Asperger's had anything to do that with that possibly? Have you
Oh,
always been like really like inquisitive about things that aren't
oh yeah,
tangible?
unbelievably, unbelievably. I mean, like I said, I was just daydreaming all the time. Every single teacher I had would always complain to my parents that all I ever did in class was zone out and I would never pay attention to anything they were saying. And then I would just ace all the quizzes and tests and just like ignore them. So they get really angry all the time and stuff. But it's like that was just me. I was bored with what they were trying to show me, and all I cared about was what, you know, I wanted to imagine and envision and then somehow create or learn about. When I tested my functions on 16 personalities, the very first time I took a personality test, they give you percentages of strengths of each of your functions. basically. They don't want to call them functions, but that's what it is. And they said that like my intuition trait was 80 to 90% strength compared to the sensing side. So that's interesting because my thinking trait was only like 50% strength. So my lead trait is not actually probably my strongest one. It's just the lead trait.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, imagine just having an INTJ dad that was like into astrology and these sort of things was probably a good way to develop it.
Oh boy, he was into everything too. He built early computers in the 80s and he was a big futurist and he was also really into politics and philosophy and he read books on ancient history all the time. He was actually kind of in some ways pretty similar to me, right? So, oh
Hmm.
yeah, yep.
Yeah,
He was huge into games. Yep.
yeah. I definitely didn't have that development. Both my mom and stepdad were ESFP, so
Oh wow.
a lot of conflict there because that's my dual side for sure.
That must have been crazy.
Yeah, and they're both borderline too, unfortunately.
Oh no.
Yeah. What about your mom? What type was she?
He is an ESFJ.
Yeah, that's a real common relationship, INTJ, ESFJ.
Yeah, it seems like it actually meshes pretty well. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because they worked back, geez, I don't know, back in the 70s, it was at Sears, Michigan
Uh-huh.
State University is the university we all went to. And so they met there and he wouldn't even approach her. He barely even talked to her. And eventually she actually had to kind of ask him out like a couple times before he would actually, and apparently he was surprised that she was even asking him. He was just like, wait, what? Whoa, hey. So
Yeah, yeah. Doesn't happen to me very often.
well, you said you attract crazy ladies, but hopefully you'll
Yeah,
attract a crazy good one.
yeah, yeah. I think it kind of needs to balance out my own crazy, I guess. All right. So you're in a, like they say, your parent function, your father, mother function, the auxiliary, whatever you want to call it, is usually the last thing you develop in your top four. But that kind of sounds the opposite to you, right?
And yeah, I would have to say, so, I mean, I think that the TE was first because I really liked action and I really liked, but right from the very start, it was all very creative. I was always I mean, I don't want to say visionary, that sounds kind of egotistical, but basically that's what it was.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I guess movement and stuff. How's your SE been?
Oh, well, okay. So how do we want to define SE? Do we want to define it as simple physical coordination and awareness, or like what is it to you?
Well, I think it's kind of a lot of things. It's definitely that. It's definitely about giving people a good time, especially what
Yeah.
ENTJs like with their child function. They just like to give people a good show, a good experience, and
Oh yeah, yeah.
mechanical aptitude, athleticism. Could be a lot of different things.
So under my little system that I'm also, this is another one of the little books that I'm trying to write, but I'm taking MBTI and kind of making it a little bit different just based on everything that I observed in our NT server, because there are so many NTs concentrated there that I got to sort of analyze them and really compare them a lot over time. I mean, a lot. It took me a while to realize this stuff, but to me, the third function is basically the thing that really drives people because I noticed that INTJ seem to be motivated by FI, even if they didn't understand it. And then the ENTJ seem to be really motivated by SE sorts of things. And so
Yeah,
it definitely is a huge motivator for me. Shared experiences. I don't know if you've ever heard about the love languages stuff, probably, but most
yeah.
ENTJs are shared experiences, love language people, because that's just the thing that drives them and motivates them is the SE. And then the FI too, of course, right? Because it's also on the bottom, and that's the intimacy aspect, basically. And
Hmm.
so for me, it's like the SE, it's a huge driving force. When I'm thinking about what motivates me and when I just sort of in my everyday functions and work and everything, it's the SE stuff that gets me through it. When I'm formulating long-term goals, it's always because of some SE reward at the end. But in terms of actually using the SE for anything, I mean, I used to play tennis in high school and I did pretty well in that. I've done pretty well in most of the sports. When I was going through Air Force training, I had to do close quarters combat and I beat almost everybody in the entire class. So um, I don't know exactly how much that's TE versus SE, but I feel like SE is playing a part. It's like a little guidance system. It's like the little voice in your head, you know?
Yeah. I don't think like one action is definitely not one function, as a lot of people think it is.
Oh
It's
yeah,
a
no.
combination of everything for sure.
Yeah,
So I do judo myself, and a lot of it just like I kind of use my NI, like, okay, let's do this, and then it'll work.
yeah,
Yeah, just kind of like intrinsic knowledge of your own body, I guess, in a lot of ways. I guess kind of
yeah,
tag teams with your SE.
yeah. I find I actually do better at physical endeavors when I'm using intuition first and foremost, you know, and ignore what my coaches are telling me. Well, not all the time, but most of the time.
Yeah, for sure. Like someone will say, just do this, but this feels good for me.
Yep.
I think
And
martial arts is very based on your body size.
yep. And your sense of awareness in yourself and how you function and work, not just physically, but also mentally.
Yeah, yeah, for
Yep.
sure.
Yep.
Speaking of that, what about your inferior function, your FI? How's
Well, how does that affect my life? What have I done with it? Well, I can tell you that there were many times, especially when I was younger, when I was absolutely furious and wrathful and vengeful and stewing in like bitter anger. And it would last a pretty long time, maybe not like years, but weeks and months, you know. The FI attribute all that to. And also the fact that I seem to be very oriented towards closer relationships with people. So one of the things that was an issue sometimes for me with the NT server, or even just any relationships, is that I would always expect people to be more focused on getting to know someone really well than they ever actually usually were. And it usually frustrated me quite a bit. And it wasn't always easy to figure out what the solution would be to getting my FI satisfied, you know?
hmm
But I am definitely that way. And in Enneagram, I have the two variants or whatever are survival and sexual. So I guess I'm an antisocially INTJ.
antisocial means like you don't really like relationships?
Antisocial in the bigger like dude bro fraternity like keg party sense where you're going and jumping in a crowd of like 1,000 people. I mean, I guess okay. So if you're high functioning autistic, you don't like that anyway. But still,
Yeah.
um, I'd much rather have a lot of really good relationships where I can relate to people really closely than always having to be in a group, but then everybody always just wants to be in a group all the time. And sometimes I like it, but then they always use it as an excuse to not do a more intimate relationship. And that I always was having issues trying to navigate that.
Yeah, that's something INTJs, they just really want a few high quality, close knit relationships.
Yeah,
It's
definitely
just
they do.
very hard to find. Like just I couldn't like imagine being with an ESFJ. They're just so social. They're probably one of the most extroverted types. How did your dad handle that?
Oh, well, let me tell you, there were some massive problems with that sometimes. And if he was on the spectrum, it's even worse. He did not care. I mean, he would just, my mom said that she was mortified many times. He used to be in the Navy for 16 years or whatever. And obviously, in order to advance the Navy, you've got to be very political. It's primarily political. It's not a meritocracy. It's just a political system. It's an arm of the government. But he would go to parties, or he would be at some kind of gathering, or he'd be in the office and he'd say these things that would just piss people off. I mean, he did not care. And my mom said that she wanted to like dig a hole and like disappear, you know?
Yeah, because I hear about some INTJs going into the military. I just don't see how an INTJ really could do it because we just hate being told what to do. I mean, the military is you're told what to do, when to do it, how to do it. How did your dad cope with that for 16 years?
He liked it. Well,
Really?
what he said is, I love it and I hate it, you know? And part of that, I believe, is the autistic angle, because autistics usually need something that's more intense and more personalized to them to feel like what they're doing is something they want to do on a daily basis. And the military is pretty intense.
Mhm.
So he really liked all that stuff. He loved the war games aspect. He loved being a navigator. He used to hunt Russian submarines in the Atlantic,
Really?
flying out of Iceland. I was actually in the womb while he was doing that over in Maine. But yeah, he liked the military and the structure. He actually didn't mind taking orders, but he definitely thought a lot of the people around him, including his superiors, were idiots, and he didn't suffer them well. And he would actually, you know, come out and it wasn't even just that he would directly tell them, it's that he would formulate traps for them and then humiliate them. And then they just, it was like, what have you just done to your career, you know?
Yeah, just I guess it's about the ride for us sometimes.
I guess so.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like I think everything an INTJ does is a love-hate relationship because you have to do pretty much anything with people for the most part, and it's just
Unfortunately.
yeah, that's just the hate part of it, I guess, because people just and INTJs usually don't clash very well.
You
All right, go dig into the shadow a little bit. I think you said you don't really subscribe much to shadow functions, but I definitely do want to see if you can kind of maybe enlighten you a little bit, or maybe
All
some
right.
realizations.
Well,
So
I'm
what
always open, so let's go for it.
so what about TI? How do you think you have TI affect you in any way?
Hmm. I don't. So I used to have an INTP friend in college that I was, pretty close to. We haven't spoken as much lately, but he obviously was always doing TI everything. And basically, it was my favorite pastime to go and chew on all of his ideas and constantly contradict him. And he actually enjoyed that because he's an INTP. But with me, for me, TI is something that's very useful, but it's not something I enjoy using at all, I would say. And that makes me sound like I'm like, just like a caveman or a meathead or something. But um, like for instance, programming and just doing math for its own sake and other things we typically ascribe to TI, or forming your own logic system that's kind of divorced from reality. To me, that's all just nonsense. And I just don't like it.
A lot of it, like it kind of comes and bites you in the ass, basically how the shadow kind of works. A lot of TI heroes kind of feel that they're not smart enough. Do you ever, and that kind of goes against your TE where you don't want to take action. Has that ever been an issue for you?
Oh, yeah. Well, not smart enough. How, I guess, is the question.
I don't know. Like, can't really describe, I guess. Like for me, I'm very critical of my own thoughts. I'll either, it kind of tricks me in a way with TI cynics is that I don't think I'm smart enough, or that I think I'm arrogant. It's kind of like that one way where I think I'm smarter than everybody else, and I might think I'm right about something. I use my TE and jump to conclusions too quick, and I don't check if it's true, and I'm actually wrong when I think
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
right.
And obviously for your Intjs, that's one of the biggest pitfalls, stop and look before you leap. But
Yeah,
no, yeah, and leaping in an intellectual sense before you make assignments and judgments, or just say something to a whole system and get a group of people to do it. It's like you've really got to be careful. And you get over that because, of course, over a lifetime you learn how not to do that. But like with the TI thing, I learned fairly early on that there is a difference between being what other people consider to be traditionally intelligent versus who I actually was. Through a fairly awful experience in school, actually, where I was going to like a school for the gifted. And I, ever since that point in sixth grade, I was totally off of valuing it. I just thought, if this isn't really me, then I'm not going to do it. I have a certain brand of intelligence. It doesn't mean I
yeah.
have to be like everyone else. And yeah, sometimes I'll think to myself, boy, I feel like a complete moron. But for the most part, I feel like I can overcome that with my other strengths.
I think that kind of ties in with our NI. We just kind of know that we're right. I mean, it hasn't might not
Yeah.
even happen yet, but we just kind of know that it's correct. And people are like, well, where's the facts? Where's the data? Where's the truth of this? And people just kind of dismiss you as stupid or crazy.
Oh yeah, yeah, and they won't listen until it's too late. That's the NI thing. It's like, look, I'm telling you that something's coming. I don't know exactly what it is, but I can give you a few ideas, and I'm also warning you. Now you need to pay. I don't care. That's just nonsense.
Yeah, I was in the bathroom at work yesterday, I think it was, and I was like standing by the door, like somebody's about to walk in. So I step away, and about 2 seconds later, someone walks in the door. Just like a weird thing that happens. So like if I told somebody that, then think I was crazy. But when it happened,
No, I've seen so many INTJ like premonitions, actually coming true, and also INFJ to some extent, but theirs are more like weird, feely, spiritual impressions. Yeah, my dad had those kinds of things happen all the time, and all
yeah,
the INTJ friends that I have from the server and everything, same deal for the most part.
I've been running into a lot of INFJs in person lately. It's kind of odd. And
Oh, it must be telling you something.
yeah. I've had to try a few relationships with them, but it just didn't work out. What about
Interesting.
I'm sorry.
Oh no, I just said it's interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about the NE. So you're kind of like your NE cynics, kind of critical about what other people want, really.
Is that what it's supposed to do?
Yeah, like
I mean, because I'm kind of critical about what other people do in general. I just don't say it as much as I used to be more polite.
I think that's kind of the control aspect that ENTJs kind of have. I think it's just because like I want you to do what I want to do because what you want to do is stupid.
Something that I've seen with what you would call an NE shadow is, or in my sense of how we define this, basically just not having any, is is this sense that like other people have this creative ability that you just don't seem to have, despite how creative you are. And it's very, very strange. And it can be very frustrating. That's what I would say about NE personally. Maybe I would tie it into how I think about other people too, for sure. But
Yeah, that's kind of how my TI cynics works. Like I always like wanted to come up like invent something or come up with this my own theory of something, but it just wasn't within me and it was very frustrating and I kind of felt stupid for it.
yeah,
But TEs are the kind of meant to take like borrow here, a little bit from here, a little bit from here, then form our own system through other people's knowledge.
yeah, which can be really disconcerting to NT types who are so closely aligned with their own sense of competency, right? Because you're like, I don't want to take stuff from other people. I don't want to deal with them, and I don't want it to come from them. So it's
Yeah.
a little bit of a psychological. You're jumping through hoops, you know.
But the good thing about that is you could make everything else, everything other stuff better, basically.
Yeah, yeah. And so we're extremely good at working with systems of every kind, including social systems. And yes, and INTJs are definitely good at it when they want to be. I've seen them do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I've seen
Okay.
INTJs be extremely perceptive about people.
Yeah, it's where we get people, but we don't get people.
Yeah, yeah, basically. Yeah.
Like we don't get them socially, but just hard to explain.
You can see their soul essence magnifying into the cosmos or something. Yeah, something like that.
That's kind of how our NE works, I think. We're very paranoid about other people's intentions and like what other people want. We think people are going to stab us in the back. So I think we automatically assume the worst from people. Well, we do automatically assume the worst from people. But once we exercise it, we can kind of see and get people and like the gist of really what they want,
Yeah.
what their intentions are.
Trying to be friends with INTJs is it's a challenge. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
It's a good challenge.
it is a chore. It definitely takes a special type of person. I personally don't have any in-person friends anymore, but I think that's kind of me moving and me kind of growing and not seeing other people want to grow.
Yeah, yeah. And also the fact that you're doing things like trying to interview to make a podcast and then pushing that forward, that's actually really good. And it's kind of a social use of your talents, your vision, your intellect, what have you. So
Yeah, I mean, like most of my like I probably had the most friends in my life were probably ESTPs. I think they and them and ESFPs are the least likely to grow.
yeah. Yeah, unfortunately.
I mean, they're great and they can be really fun and they can be just because there's one ESTP guy I work with. He'll just listen to this machine that washes the benches that lay the corn plants on where I started working. And he could just listen to it. He could like, this is what the machine's doing now. The machine's releasing the detergent. The machine's now getting the bleach. It's now draining.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing actually, just how physically aware they are of just the environment. And
Yeah, that was my grandpa for sure. I always got along well with him.
is he an ESTP?
Yep, he was.
Yeah, I had a lot of ESTPs and ESFPs in my family. My grandpa was like the town drunk slash badass, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah. It's like kind of a vibe.
Yeah, I mean, he literally just beat everybody up in town. Like, go to the bars, and it was like an MMA before it happened.
It's awesome.
And what about SI Trickster? This is something that we kind of have in common, I guess. Well, we have a lot in common. I mean, it's kind of like you really just don't take care of yourself. You might stay up 24 hours working on a project and
Oh
not
yeah,
sleep or not eat.
for real. I mean, I was blasting through work today, which is basically just nonstop work for 8 hours, and then I just kept working all the way up until almost right now. on the Taurus document that I'm going to throw in the server pretty effing soon. It's like basically done. I'll probably just turn it into a PDF, but and sometimes also with games once in a while, I'll basically just stay up all night playing like, a 4X space strategy game or something that I bought on Steam.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have an SI demon where I just know something's bad for me, but I do it anyways. Like I didn't get
Yeah,
a sleep schedule till I was like 30 years old, really.
I feel like my other functions compensate pretty well for not doing stupid things to myself, but I also have a tendency to push myself really, really far and hard sometimes too. So I don't know
Yeah.
if people with strong SI don't do that. I guess they don't. I'm not sure. I've seen because ISTJs have it, right? And they can push themselves really, really hard, but I think that they do it in a very artful way, let's say.
We just go balls to the walls and we burn out quick.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
just like go, 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 go. Because I was reading this book by Dario Nardi called
Oh yeah, Dario Nardi. Yep, I know him.
yeah, it slips my mind now, but he did EEG scans on all the personality types. And
Yep, yep, that's it. Yep.
NI-DOMs, they consistently showed that when they're presented with a problem that they don't know, they use all their neocortex.
Yeah. Yeah, I
And
remember that.
yeah, and it's
It's
just like,
really awesome. It's really interesting.
yeah, so it's just kind of like how we figure out our problem solving skills, I guess. And we're trying to do something when we don't want, we don't know, we just burn our brains out.
At least it
I
feels
got
that way.
yeah, high SI users, they could just take anything. That's one good thing about SI. I mean, I think they pace themselves more and they can definitely like know when to
Yeah.
rest, but they could just keep going and going. They're like, it's kind of the story. It's just a video I just recorded, but I haven't released yet on SI. Kind of like the tortoise and the hare analogy, I guess.
Uh-huh. Yeah. High
Um,
SI users can actually be real beasts.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I think they're less susceptible to trauma and all sorts of different things. I think trauma
Yeah.
just doesn't bother them as bad as SE users really.
I usually see them being pretty tough. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Just like I think my son's great grandma, I think her son's an INTJ, a very, very toxic one who's heavily in the mess. And I mean, she just took everything from him. I mean,
Oh, geez.
like he embezzled her bank account, was like abusing her, and
Oh, wow.
woman just kept going,
Man.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it is. At some point also pretty foolhardy, but it is impressive.
Yeah, yeah. It's just like SI is like they're just like their family. I can't cut them out, but it doesn't matter if they're family. If they're hurting you, if they're toxic, you just need to let them go.
Yeah. Or teach them a lesson.
Or teach them a lesson. But they just it's just real. I think SI can be real enabling in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. They're really tough, but they kind of just let things slide too.
Yeah, they're kind of doormats in a way.
Yeah.
Yes, they can take it, but they can't dish it out.
It's kind of weird.
How was
That must be, go ahead.
oh sorry. Was your mom like that with your dad?
In what way?
I mean, like, INTJs, they can be very impatient, very irritable,
Oh
very
boy. The great clan chief who has no patience for anyone else and just wants to assert his ideas. I'm right. slams the hammer into the middle of the kitchen table. Like, listen to me. Yeah. But it's really interesting because she really liked all of his intellectualisms a lot. And even though at times there was friction because she didn't necessarily like the fact that he was doing that socially, it wasn't nice, right? She also really liked the fact that he was intelligent, decisive, had clear vision. And so most of the time, it actually turned into them just discussing things for a long time. And they really enjoyed talking to each other. So, it's interesting that way.
yeah. And one of the worst things you could do is to an I or ESFJ is they're really, really sensitive to being stupid because they have their TI inferior. And if you don't listen to their ideas, they can just that's when you piss them off. That you ever
That
see
is
that?
exactly right. Oh yeah. Yep.
Dad just kind of like dismissed her ideas and pissed her off like real quick.
A few times, but he also had this sort of like spirit behind it where he wanted to also kind of examine everything, right? So it wasn't just you're stupid, it's more like I'm right and you need to listen to me. But then we can also talk about it because it's kind of interesting, right? So like he would do that.
Yeah, I think when it comes down to it, INTJs are really, really open-minded about things.
Yeah.
It's just when we get on our high horse and we think we're right, we're hard to knock off, I guess. But when we do
Yeah.
fall, we fall hard.
There are visionaries, seers, philosophers, but then they also have sort of the secret drill instructor that jumps out and hits people in the face.
Yeah, that's why I hate all these videos and articles and this clickbait where INTJs, everyone just loves them and they think they're so good and they're infallible, but no, it just isn't true. I mean, when most people encounter us, they hate us.
Yeah, well, that's like 50% of the United Arab Emirates population testing as ENTJs, and you're like, no.
Really?
Yeah, it's just really, they have this whole thing over there, the patriarchy that they have, the the patriarchy in quotations, but basically it's like everybody wants to be that way because of the culture. So it just seems like they'll kind of lie their way through the test. It's like you're not the only population on Earth that has such a high ratio of those. That doesn't make any sense. So
Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of like the American dream now. It's like you work 80 hours a week and try to get as much
ugh,
money as you can. That's like the
American
ENTJ way.
nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really like the formula in happiness, I think.
Work until you're about ready to die so that you can retire and then not have any time for your money that you built up. It sounds
Yeah,
great.
then your life's gone.
Yep, yep. Perfect.
Do you think I know ENTJs are really rare too? Like some statistics say that are even rare in INTJs. Do you think
Yeah.
that you guys are misunderstood it as well?
Misunderstood. That's not even coming close. We could do an entire book about NTs, any specific one being misunderstood, not fitting into society, not knowing what to do, people not knowing what to do with them. Yeah, they're hugely misunderstood.
It seems like ENTJs, they really have pretty big social circles for the most part.
Yeah, despite my focus on trying to have closer relationships, I've slowly built up so many that I have a lot of them floating around at this point. So
Yeah. Right. The last function about FE, which is really, that's probably my least favorite demon function, maybe after NI demon. It's just like you are very inconsiderate of other people's feelings. Has that ever been a
yeah,
factor in your life?
100%. I've been a complete monster. I've destroyed entire worlds, especially when it says ENFJ on it. And that's just, I'm like remorseless. It's scorched earth. They're all left like carbonized skeletons. They're just, and the problem is, I have my brother's in ENFJ.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So the biggest thing that we argue about is politics, and he just cannot see reason half the time because his FE is just banging this drum of treat everybody nice, and the only thing that matters is knee-jerk idealism. And I'm always thinking like, but that's the stupidest thing that you could think. You need to be more rational. Pay attention to the actual evidence. Why can't you use reason? And so, I mean, when I was younger, I had a few times that I was really aware of maybe being too nasty to people,
mhm.
being too inconsiderate, and I was really, really sensitive to that. So from an early time frame, I was trying really hard not to be that way. So thankfully, I think I've done it a lot less than I could have. But when I want to, I just whip that out, and it's just like, that's it, you're done.
Yeah, I think that's just what this ENTJ girl I was just that I was considering. She was gorgeous too, man, but wow, her FE, she just treated people like numbers pretty much, including me, and I didn't really appreciate that. That really hurt our FI. I think we're really soft and gooey and inside with our FI child.
Yeah, oh yeah. Whenever ENTJ women are doing that, they are afraid, pretty much universally, as far as I have ever seen. So
Afraid. What do you think they're afraid of? Exactly, just getting close to people.
well, imagine. So we started the conversation talking about the differences between men and women and the fact that we don't accept those anymore in society, right? Now
Hmm.
imagine living in a society where you're not allowed to be female and vulnerable, and yet underneath it you still are. And at the same time, being an ENTJ, where you don't even feel comfortable with your emotions at all. And you can't exert much control in the environment because you're a woman. So what do you do with your T and your NI? I think that female ENTJs feel uniquely vulnerable.
Yeah, they're a pretty rare occurrence in the world, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I think the recent study that the ENTJ girl that we've been talking about, my ENTJ girl, she linked to a study, but she said that basically the new study is saying that ENTJs are the rarest and not INFJ. So who knows? Maybe it's true, maybe it isn't. But
I think it's pretty impossible to tell what the exact statistics are. Statistics are just ballparks, anyways, really.
yeah, and they're based on what people answered for themselves. And they get to choose what they look like in a lot of cases. So
Yeah, that's why I have no merit in like test. That's why I just don't like the MBTI because it's just a test.
and yet, as I told one INTJ typologist, a few years ago, there really isn't another way to measure personality traits than anything that has to do with behavior, because even if you ask them questions about how they function internally, their answers to those questions are still a behavior.
That's why I don't really like to ask questions in particular. I just like to have conversations and
That's right. That's right.
grade how they answer.
And observe them. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just an observable thing, because like just like psychology, almost all of it's self-reporting, and that's just a giant MBTI test. And so I don't really
Exactly.
take a lot of merit in psychological studies.
Yep. Unless they're performed really, really well.
Yeah, but just they just don't budget psychology like they would like scientific
No.
studies. And
Well, that's the joke. Social sciences. What's that?
yeah, it's just so overlooked, and it's just so vastly important. And if we fix our behavioral health system, everything else will fall into place. It might take
Yeah.
generations, but it will.
And I truly believe that that's our biggest blind spot in our civilization entirely right now, is that right there. It's so important and it controls so much, and yet it is so misunderstood, and basically nobody even knows about it. So
Yeah, sure.
despite mental health initiatives online, right, it's not really exactly the same thing that we're talking about here.
Oh, what was that last part? I didn't catch it.
I said, despite the mental health initiatives that we have online now, because that's kind of just a feel good like fad thing as far as I can tell, and it's not really actually psychology.
What do you mean exactly?
So a lot, well, this is what I was talking about with therapists before, a lot of the real psychotherapeutic work that has to be done, or even just the psychological truths that need to be kind of thrown out into society so that people can be made more aware, all this stuff is potentially very socially volatile and politically incorrect. Getting to the truth of someone's feelings and what they want, what they don't want, what they've done that's maybe not very kosher, all this stuff can be very damaging to people's reputations. It can be very heavily against the political system. And so online feel good initiatives are okay. They're kind of starting to get there. At least there's some awareness that there even is an issue in this area. But unfortunately, they just kind of get consumed by the very thing that they're trying to fight against, which is the social system is bad, and it has all these ingrained beliefs that everyone just follows mindlessly. And it's like, yeah, but now your online feel good initiatives are also one of those things. So there's not necessarily that desire to pierce down to the very deepest parts of the human psyche, no matter how frightening or supposedly dangerous it is, right? It's more of a feel good process than it is one of truth.
Yeah, that's what Jung was all about, just diving in this conscious and the unconscious mind and just really like getting to the root of your personality and your own ego.
Exactly. Yep.
And
Examining everything ruthlessly, brutally even, but with a purpose.
and just because it wasn't measured in statistics and empirical studies, it's just automatically dismissed. It's kind of like astrology. It's just the total dismissal of what we don't understand is just complete ignorance.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't really even know how true astrology is per se, but it is definitely something interesting to examine with people, because they often have a lot of good ideas and insights coming to the surface nonetheless. So
Yeah. Like I think you're just a brilliant astrologer. The stuff you put in the Discord server, I need to go back and save it in a Word document or something. It's just like, wow,
oh
that's really
geez, I mean,
insightful.
if you like it that much, I could go a lot further.
Yeah, maybe we could just do another podcast where like
Okay, yeah, sure.
yeah, maybe we'll
Yeah,
talk about that in the future.
I didn't expect to be this good at it, but okay, yeah. Yep, and I'll put my document in the server, and then you can kind of see that it's only about one sign, but I did it because a lot of people in the server seem to have that sign as being important in their charts. So that's why I even did it. So
You ever thought about doing like as a side gig sort of thing?
yeah, more recently, before nobody ever took any of this seriously. And I've done this for quite a long time, but this is the first group of people that actually seem to really care.
Yeah,
So it's kind of funny.
just for like a couple of weeks, that's all everybody talked about. Like, read me, and like, hold on, I'll get to you.
Yeah.
I really love just like, because I always just wondered like, why am I so different? And I had like an astrology, like my birth chart, like one of those online things, and yeah, there was something to it, but I think yours is just more complex and thorough.
Yeah. If I ever get around to Gemini North Node, like I did with this Taurus document, then it'll be interesting for you.
Yeah, that's something I never really even heard of before. Do you have any good recommendations on books on astrology?
I do. There is one guy in particular that's really good that I like. His name is Stephen Forrest, and he. So this is what we call evolutionary astrology. It's completely different from normal astrology, which basically is either just trying to predict the future or just kind of telling you stuff, being like, "Here it is," and no insights, right? No actionable items. So Stephen Forrest is an evolutionary astrologer, and he is really good at figuring out these sort of archetypes that go into existence basically, and talking about why they matter and how to deal with them. And then he takes it and applies it to the nodes and says, this is kind of where you're coming from, these are your pitfalls, this is what could cause problems for you in life, and this is how you can kind of go in a more positive direction, but then this is how it all ties together, and these are the complex interactions. So he's really good.
Yeah, I think it's this astrology gets a bad rap from like this, like the horoscopes, a paragraph of each sign in the newspaper. It's kind of like MBTI. It's like just this very vague information on your type.
Well, you could easily ask, why the sun sign? Why not my Mars sign? Why not, so
Could
if
you
that
again?
really,
Go
what's
ahead.
that?
Go ahead and finish your thought.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you took my Mars sign, I'd be a Capricorn, not Scorpio anymore. If you took my rising sign, I'd be a Taurus. So
Yeah. Yeah. Could you remind me again what the Gemini node is exactly?
yeah. So when the North Node, so the North Node is the point. It's considered, they call it a point of bliss or a point of destiny. But when it's in Gemini, Gemini is a sign of thought, communication, abstraction, analysis, um, particularly comparative analysis and stuff like that. And Gemini is associated with friendships and communities, but it's also just kind of associated with everyday social interaction. It's also associated with siblings for that reason, and communities, and marketplaces and things. And so Gemini is this sign, and it can also be about writing and teaching a lot too, just like Sagittarius, which is its opposite. And since Sagittarius is its opposite, your South Node is in Sagittarius, your North Node's in Gemini. And if your North Node's in Gemini, then it means that what you're kind of aiming for in life as a primary point of development, even though there's other things that can happen beyond it, but the primary thing that you need to focus on more consciously is this idea that you need to become sort of more intellectual. You need to pursue things in life that are more about analysis. And it could be a very social analysis too. And so when you said that you're doing this podcast and all this stuff and trying to kind of make a venture out of it, I thought, wow, so this is actually really appropriate, because it's also in the eighth house. And the eighth house, I mean, if you want me to get into all this stuff, it's kind of complicated, but
Yeah.
the eighth house is the house that is associated with Scorpio, and the wheel of the houses rotates independently of the wheel of the signs, which means that the houses can be in different signs for different people.
Mm-hmm.
And so in particular, your Gemini intellectual analysis sort of aim in life is in the realm of, guess what? Psychology, deep analysis, and intimate understanding. And since Gemini is a social sign and the eighth house is about the depth and the psychology, voila, you've got the podcast and the personality typing.
Really interesting. I know like something too. I forgot exactly the jargon and like what sign and what's everything like that and what house, but something that really struck me is that I'm very rebellious with my attitude towards people, and it can kind of get me in trouble. And that's just something that sound like, I guess, an
Yeah.
INTJ thing,
Yeah.
really.
And this is also why you can't just take one thing in the chart. You got to take all of it together and then try to put it together in a very nuanced way. And it takes a certain kind of person, I think, to be able to do that well. So
Yeah.
dealing with so many huge themes and so many complicated relationships in that chart. So
I don't want to make this thing too long. We're about an hour and 10 in, so I just kind of want to wrap this up with a few more questions. These are kind of questions that I ask everybody. We can definitely do this again. We are talking about doing a ENTJ panel sort of thing too with some of the ENTJs on the server. Have you ran that by them yet? I haven't really mentioned it.
oh, I mentioned it to Lanfaria. Her real name's Chrissy. Um, and to the one from Jamaica that we've known for a while, who's our good friend. I don't think I mentioned, maybe I did. I think he said it would be cool. He just said, "Oh, that would be cool," you know. So I could be more serious about the propositions and then kind of invite them to do it if you want.
Sure. We'll talk about it later at a time, but we'll wrap this up for now.
All right.
All right. So questions I ask everybody. Well, what are your experiences with INTJs? You talked about your dad a little bit. Have you ever met any other INTJs?
I've met tons of INTJs. I have a good friend from Somalia who's an INTJ female.
Really?
Yeah, that's an interesting bunch of stuff there, but that's going to take too much time to explain. There was a guy that I was having massive fights with, like giant, like all out slugfest, and in my Discord server over typology. He was an INTJ from Germany. Um, there's quite a few. There's a lot of them.
Yeah, we're out there. It was kind of hard to find, I guess.
Yeah, they got hyper concentrated in my server for a while. So
Yeah. Okay. What are your least favorite type and your favorite type?
at least favorite type. I honestly don't have a least favorite type. I've always been of the opinion that it takes all kinds, and I really enjoy seeing and analyzing all the different kinds. I guess that's just my approach to life. My favorite type, well, for what use, I guess, I have a favorite type for everything. You can throw all these different types of different things and they work better.
Yeah. Guess that's a more mature answer to it. I definitely have a least favorite type. Cough, coffee with TJ.
I don't blame you. I sometimes really struggled with my own type.
No, not ENTJ, ESTJs.
Oh, well, that's close. I
Yeah.
struggled with them too.
I can get along with like the real young ones and the real old ones, but from about like 25 to like 55, no thank you.
Yeah, we've had some really obnoxious ones cross paths with us, but I always found a way to make friends with them and encourage them. And then they were pretty cool. They were pretty friendly after that. So it's like, I don't know. Maybe it's just learning how to deal with them. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys got a lot of camaraderie with the TI and the FI there.
You would think so, but it's also kind of like the second that you meet, it's almost like you're in a competition with each other too. And there's this friction.
Yeah, you can see what's coming. They can't.
Yeah. And they're always trying to basically prove that they're smarter than you. And it's like, we should just stop.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There's always a. I don't think I could out TE a TE hero, but still, yeah, use other skills, I guess.
Yep.
All right. What would you like INTJs or other types to know about you?
About me the person or me the type.
Either way, however you feel like answering it.
Um, about me, other types. That the fact that sometimes I was more demanding about trying to form a closer relationship was due to the fact that I was just naturally someone who is more invested in intimacy, because I think a lot of them misunderstand that and they don't like it because they just want to be in the group, like I said. And it would be nice if they had more awareness of how that functions for people, could kind of see into their minds a little bit more and be like, oh, if they're trying to form this kind of relationship with me, that means that they value me. It's not an imposition. It's not them being weird or nasty or whatever. So I think that ENTJs can struggle with that a lot because nobody really gets what they're trying to do on that front because the TE is so kind of almost sterile. And so
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what would you like to know about? Excuse me. What would you like to know more about INTJs?
would I like to know more about INTJs? Um, how to, well, basically the thing that I was doing for the longest time with them, how to develop a better relationship with them, because out of all the types, they're one of the most challenging to do that with. But it's not like they necessarily dislike it. So it's this interesting challenge that you're trying to engage with over time, trying to figure out how to draw the interpersonal relationship out of them more without stepping on their functions and kind of like, pissing them off, basically making things worse for them. How do you develop a closer relationship with INTJs as a friend without it being onerous for them?
I think it's a lot how your mom took it with your dad. You just kind of got to invite them. Then you got to be really patient and let them trust you, build trust, and just kind of let them let down their guard because we're super paranoid, like I said, with our innie and our shadow, and just
Yeah.
make
Yep.
them feel included and make them feel liked and just to kind of accept them for who they are, for their, I guess, our weird quirkiness.
Well, perfect, because that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, it sounds like you're a very agreeable guy, especially for an ENTJ for sure.
Wow, thanks.
All right, I think that's about all that I have. I definitely
Yeah.
would like, I know you said that you had a book that you written, but you kind of pulled it off because it wasn't selling. I think that's just a struggle that a lot of authors have. Would you mind talking about that a little bit before you go?
Yeah. The book was entirely about fixing gendered relationships in society and how men and women actually need to function in order for marriages and basically sex to work. Now that I'm getting into this, you can kind of see why I was leery about keeping it out in the open for too long if it wasn't going to be successful. But I mean, I'm using a fake name on the book anyway. But it was basically about intimacy between the genders and what that meant at a sort of animal and economic level and how we needed to fix our approach to it socially.
I think there's a lot of books out there like it, really. Like
Yeah. Well, back in 2015, I don't know. Maybe not. I know there's more now, of course, but
when the Way of the Superior Man came out, that's kind of the
yeah.
gist of it, really.
Yeah. And I was drawing on even older sources like pickup artists and what they said about how women acted on dates and things like that. It wasn't advocating pickup artist lifestyle, but it was trying to draw on the information, the examples. And then people get really offended by that stuff really fast. So
Yeah, David Dita wrote it and it came out in 1997.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it'd be
that's
very
crazy.
helpful. Yeah, yeah. You can definitely tell he's an NI Dom. I don't know if he's an INFJ or INTJ. I think how he understands people, probably more an INFJ, but
Yeah. I've seen INFJ males kind of be a little bit more gruff than the INFJ females, but
for sure they get mistyped. I did one guy with Peter, and they do come off INTJ-ish a lot. The males do because we're
it's
just so
weird.
encouraged to suppress our emotional side.
It's so weird. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they have it rough, I think.
Yeah. Poor devils.
All right,
Not
well, I
like
think
us. We just don't care.
yeah, we just kind of like we put our ration in front of our feelings, really, which is not always a good thing. Well, that's all I have. I think this was a great podcast. I think you have a very powerful and unique mind, and I
Oh,
definitely think you
thanks.
should share your thoughts. And I look forward to the Taurus document coming out soon.
Yeah. And I could definitely keep talking for like 2 more hours, but that would be irresponsible. So I guess we'll save it for another time, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I'd like to do a follow up on this one, especially if we do like an astrology reading. I think that'd be really cool. 'Cause I want to do something with how to develop your NI, and I think an astrology reading is definitely a way to do it. Like,
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
right, do you have anything for the people before you go? You want to say any last questions, comments, concerns?
Let me think. Yes. Why is everyone so unaware of what's right in front of their faces just because the social group or the society told you it was one way, even though you know that it isn't? Why can't you just simply be more aware? That's what I would ask.
Yeah, I don't think I have an answer to that, unfortunately.
Fear probably is the answer, but there's a lot more to it. But anyway, we're done now.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
We definitely have weird conversations like this on a Discord server. It's been a little slow lately, but I think the retrograde's coming up and everybody's kind of in their feelings right now.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, you can find that in the description. Also, add me on social media, intjequation.com all around. I'm most active on Instagram. Think of going to clickbait. Have a great day.
Thank you.